I've been waiting for months. I have no intention.
Okay, now for chapter 5. Let's give a brief intro because of the situation involved at this point in the book of Esther, and that is she is about to go in to King Xerxes and make this request. Alexander McLaren noted how patriotism is more evident than religion in the book of Esther. To turn to it after the fervors of prophets and the continual recognition of God in history which marks the other historical books, like Ezra and Nehemiah and all of these, is like coming down from heaven to earth, as Ewald says. But that difference in tone probably accurately represents the difference between the saints and heroes of an earlier age and the Jews in Persia, in whom national feeling was stronger than devotion. So it's in this book of Esther that we really find a great ancient account about how this national pride, even whenever the Jews are in foreign lands, like these Jews in the Persian Empire, even whenever they're in foreign lands, they still have this sense of great unity together, and how Satan tries to destroy them and God still preserves them even amongst the Gentiles. Verse 1, Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. One can truly only imagine the fear in which Queen Esther was feeling at that very moment. She hadn't seen the king in quite a while. It's been about a month, a little over. She's been fasting for 3 days in prayer with God, trying her best to just think of all the scenarios that are going to play out. Is the king mad at her or whatever? And no doubt in her mind, she's probably thinking about Vashti and how she fell out of favor with the king. So she makes her appearance to Xerxes, whom was known for just executing people on a whim. He does that to Haman. He has him killed immediately in a brutal fashion. But we'll come to that here in later chapters. So she appears before him, and it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. Now, if that promise sounds familiar to any of you, you may recall how in Mark 6, the very same reckless promise is made by Herod Antipas to the daughter of Herodias. But fortunately, Esther is the polar opposite of Herodias, and instead of asking for someone's life, she's actually asking for it to be spared, but that comes along a little bit later. Verse 4, And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Cambridge noted at this point, Esther having hazarded her life. The king recognizes, and the king was well aware that Esther put her life on the line. So he's kind of curious as to what is this request. It must be very important. Esther having hazarded her life, the king recognizes that she has some weighty reason for such an act, and in the cheerfulness induced by the banquet, a frame of mind upon which Esther had doubtless calculated, he repeats his question towards the end of the feast. Verse 7, Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said, meaning I'll tell you my petition. Now, why is Esther hesitating right here? Matthew Poole had some very good notes on this. She hesitated, either through modesty or because she was a little daunted with the king's presence and had not yet courage to propose her request. Or in policy, because she would further engage the king's affection to her by a second entertainment, and would also intimate to him that her petition was of a more than ordinary nature, and, to warm up to him a little bit more, and for her to get more comfortable with him. and principally, now listen to this, by direction and disposition of the divine providence, which took away her courage or utterance for this time. God took away that confidence at that moment for a very good reason, once again, that she might have a better opportunity for it the next time by that great accident which happened before it. Little did Esther know what was about to transpire. See, if she would have made her petition right then, it would not have been as beneficial. For the high honor which the king bestowed on Mordecai the next day made way for her petition. You see, Esther didn't know the future. God does, which came in very seasonably at the banquet of wine. So this second meeting was far greater set up in order to make the king's favor toward Mordecai and Esther undeniable, and to make the case for Haman to be just a losing battle. Verse 9, Then went Haman forth that day, joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him. Just listen to this horrible advice. It sounds like Jezebel to me. Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, that's 75 feet tall. And tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Now right here's a statue that's 75 feet tall. That's quite imposing. Charles Ellicott noted how 50 cubits high, that's 75 feet, the great height being to call as much attention as possible to the execution, that thereby Haman's glory might be proportionately increased.